Maaddi is going to be busier than almost anyone next week at Super Bowl Radio Row. I understand, Alex, you and the whole gang is going out there, but most of you will not be as busy as Rob Maaddi is, which is why I want to get him on before he is entering his busy run, which is basically going to consume him out there in San Fran. Rob, appreciate you jumping on the final day of January. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Did you say Royal Rumble is in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, it's in Riyadh.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. All right. I got to follow up on some WWE.
I mean, I follow it for very different reasons than most people, Rob. The athletes fascinate me. It's always fascinated me the things that they can do, like physically. So to me, it's like I enjoy the presentation and the what they can do and that what comes with that. I don't really get as too desperately hung up on like who my favorite wrestler is. You know what I mean?
I like the storylines and always enjoyed the interviews. I've always put together like a top 5, top 10 of the greatest wrestlers behind the microphone, whether it's Ric Flair, The Rock, Dusty Rhodes, Steve Austin, Chris Jericho. I mean, it's just off the top of my head. Road Warrior Hawk, for some people who can go that far back. Arn Anderson was good on the microphone.
Wow, you are going back.
Yeah, I'm going back to NWA and all of those AWA era. So it's always been great entertainment. And then it got really raunchy, and my wife made me stop watching wrestling when the girls were born.
I love that Dusty pool because to me, Dusty's one of the most just charismatic microphone guys of all time.
Oh, he's one of the best.
Guys, I'll be like just driving around with the family, and then I'll just think of something Dusty said and just blurt it out of my mouth, and they'll look at me like I'm insane, and it's just a Dusty interview that still just is in my memory, and I can recite it word for word, and it's wild. They're like, "What are you doing? What are you talking about?" Like I have some kind of issue. I mean, and it goes beyond like funky like a monkey, you know.
You know you're good when every time someone tells a story about you, they got to do your impression in your voice.
For sure. Absolutely.
By the way, really quick, you know who does a great impression of Dusty Rhodes is Seth Rollins, because I don't know if you heard, Rob. So Seth Rollins, one of the main stars now, Dusty gave him his name. When he first,
I didn't know that. I've seen Seth on NFL Network.
Yes.
Last year I saw him on Radio Row, and I was supposed to interview him. Then I had to leave to go to a team event, and I missed speaking to Seth. I think he's a phenomenal performer, and he's great on the microphone. But I didn't know that Dusty gave him his name.
Yeah, I don't want to shortchange the story, but like when Seth tells the story about Dusty giving him his name, he does the impression, like you said, of like every time, you talk about Dusty, you start sounding like Dusty. I think Seth Rollins might have the best impersonation of Dusty Rhodes I've ever heard.
I got to check that out. I hope he's probably going to be doing something NFL related, run around Radio Row. I got to make that happen.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, you are on your way to Super Bowl, but before we get to the Super Bowl next weekend, we got to get into all of these coaching changes. And Rob, we'll preface it by this. I said this week when the Eagles hired Sean Mannion, and then they hired Josh Grizzard, I don't think it's a coincidence, Rob, that the Philadelphia Eagles interviewed not one, not two, not three, but 4 different men with ties to the Shanahan-McVay coaching tree, and then they hire a guy who has deep connections to that coaching tree. It seems like to me, Rob, that all along this might have been the direction they wanted to go in, was to get someone to come in with a completely different offensive background than Nick Sirianni.
And I like it. I like the Sean Mannion hire, and I know he's young, and I know he's never called plays, and he doesn't have that experience. But he's a guy who was a backup quarterback for 9 years in the NFL, and I think he threw under 40 passes. So to throw under 40 passes, be a backup for that long, to stick around that long, he's been around a lot of people with different offensive minds, creativity, ideas, schemes, and systems, and just some, obviously, like you said, Shanahan, McVay, those guys, and the success that they've had, to me, this hire can be a home run. It could also be a big swing and miss. But until you go through it and see how he does, I've got to be able to bet on the Eagles. I said this as soon as it happened. When Doug Peterson was hired, he was called the worst coaching hire in that coaching cycle. 2 years later, and I know that was just one guy, Mike Lombardi, but I know Eagles fans weren't happy about Doug Peterson. Why are they hiring Doug Peterson? He's from the Andy Reid tree, and he's just a guy that Howie and Jeffrey Lurie can control. 2 years later, wins the Super Bowl. Nick Sirianni, we all know when he was hired what happened at press conference. He was mocked. He was mocked all throughout. Took him to a Super Bowl second year, won a Super Bowl year 4. So when people hate an Eagles hire, I think that's a good thing because I think it could turn out. If you want to go back to Andy Reid, few people wanted him. Charlie Manuel, nobody wanted him. They wanted Jim Leland. So you don't have to bring in the people's choice. You have to bring in the right choice. And I will defer to Howie and Jeffrey Lurie, and obviously Nick Sirianni's got a big hand in this. He's the head coach, and he conducted most of the interviews, and he's in there, and he wants to bring in a guy. But I think this has got an opportunity to be a very successful run with an offensive coordinator. But of course, we know if he does very well, and the Eagles get back into a deep playoff run or go to the Super Bowl, he'll probably get hired as a head coach next year, and that's just the nature of having a successful offensive coordinator. Their next step is head coach. As far as Josh Grizzard, I don't mind it as pass game coordinator. I would not have liked Josh as the as the OC because of what I saw here in Tampa. This is offense in Tampa that went from being top 5 in the league in passing and rushing under Liam Cohn to 21st with Josh Grizzard in his first year, and they gave him more talent, even though they had a lot of injuries, especially in the offensive line. But I will go back to in 2024 when he was Tampa Bay's pass game coordinator, Baker Mayfield had the best year of his career, 70+% completion, 4,500 yards, 40+ touchdowns, a passer rating over 100. That was working with Josh Grizzard as the pass game coordinator. Some guys are best fits for certain roles. Maybe that's what he can do best, and he certainly had success in that role. Doesn't mean that he can't be an offensive coordinator down the road, but I think bringing in his mindset, knowing his background with Liam Cohn and Sean McVay in L.A., and also with Mike McDaniel in Miami at one point, you've got an offensive staff now that adds a lot of different ideas to pull from. And I think that could be beneficial for the Eagles and for Jalen Hurts.
So with NFL senior insider for the Associated Press, Rob Maaddi, joining us here on Hanging with Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, to that point, what I do think is interesting about Mannion is that, you look at the Eagles, and maybe this is a little bit, too much string theory about my part, but every time they won a championship, Rob, it's been with a former quarterback as a coach. Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, Kellen Moore. I don't think it's a coincidence the Eagles have had success with a certain type of coach. And I wanted to play with you what Nick Foles said on the season podcast. And you know Nick well. Nick is a very thoughtful guy. Foles isn't going to say something out of turn, Rob. This is what he said about the hiring of Sean Mannion. He actually points himself to Howie and Lurie and their influence on the decision.
If you look at the Eagles, they have a methodology. Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie have a methodology of why they do things. So why did they get Jalen Hurts when they had Carson Wentz? Well, Mr. Lurie loved Russell Wilson back in the draft that was my draft. So, hey, this guy reminds me of Russell Wilson. Let's get Jalen Hurts. All right, great. Tanner McKee, who's the backup now. Why did they get Tanner McKee, who's the backup? Well, Tanner reminded them of me. I know that for a fact. We have the same agent. He reminded them of me, so they love Tanner. They love him in that building. They think the world of him. We love Kellen Moore. We won a Super Bowl with Kellen Moore. You know what? Sean Mannion, if there was anyone out there that is the next Kellen Moore, it's Sean Mannion. So let's go get him. So they're going back in the history of what's worked for them.
Rob, what are your thoughts on Nick Foles' assessment there?
I think he's dead on, and Nick would know. And I like how he equated Jalen Hurts to Russell Wilson and what the Eagles thought of Russell Wilson and how much they wanted him at that point in time. And even at one point a couple of years ago, if you'll remember, after Jalen's, I guess it was whenever Russell was available and went from Seattle to Denver, there was interest there, and he didn't want to come to the Eagles. So that's how much they thought of Russell. And the Tanner McKee, Nick Foles comparison makes sense. And then obviously that leads to Kellen Moore and Sean Mannion. There's something to be said for having an offensive coordinator who played quarterback who understands what it takes, and also who played it at the level of a backup as opposed to a starting quarterback. Because at the backup level, obviously the starter is going to have to be fully prepared and play. But so does the backup if you do your job well. And as we said earlier, for Sean Mannion to stick around the league 9 seasons and not really play much, he was a very well-prepared backup quarterback that coaches felt comfortable with him as another voice in that QB room, which is so important to the development of whoever your quarterback is, whether it's a veteran just to have somebody there as a sounding board, or whether it's a young guy to have more of a veteran presence as a backup, to have that guy in there too, just so you can – sometimes you're a liaison between as a backup to the offensive coordinator, to the quarterback's coach. So I think there are a lot of intangible factors that Sean Mannion brings to the table, and I didn't think to correlate that. Frank Reich, backup quarterback, offensive coordinator, Super Bowl champs. Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator, backup quarterback, Hey, that means they're going to win a Super Bowl next year with Sean Mannion. Like, I don't know what the odds are, Josh, but I'm going to go put $1.50 on it or whatever.
Rob, with all the drama that was circulating around Jeff Stoutland and, having power of the run game, how much of that did really restrict the Eagles and who they were looking to bring in as the offensive coordinator?
I don't think it was that restrictive as it could be as it was made out to be. I also don't think, guys, a lot was made about the Eagles interviewing people, and I think we spoke about this last week. Just because you pull out of a job or withdraw your name doesn't mean that you were up for it. It means that you pulled out because you weren't getting it most often, or there's another job that you want to take that's being offered to you. So I don't look at it from the perspective of the Eagles were turned down by all of these various guys just because they interviewed them and went on and got a job somewhere else. I think they wanted to do an exhaustive process and search, interview a lot of candidates. And what happens when you bring in a lot of different candidates, different coordinators, different minds, and you interview them, you also get ideas. If Nick Sirianni's sitting there speaking to Mike McDaniel about what he could do with Jalen Hurts in this offense, doesn't mean you have to hire Mike McDaniel to learn some of what his ideas would be for that offense. I don't think that could be understated. I think it's important to draw from what Brian Dable sees and would do for you and what he would say to you in an interview, or Matt Nagy, or any one of these guys that were interviewed for this job, and you pull from that and you put that in your basket and in your toolbox, and you draw from it at some point, and then at the same time you continue to search. So I understand the situation with Jeff Stoutland, and then seeing the report that he also had some of those duties taken away during the season. He's a phenomenal offensive line coach, one of the best in the business, one of the best all time. If you say offensive line coaches, the first 2 names that come to my mind are Jeff Stoutland and Howard Mudd. So I think he's always going to have a home and a place in Philly. Stoutland University, running those offensive linemen and getting the most out of them, and bringing in a guy like Sean Mannion with the combination of Josh Grizzard to handle the pass game, I think can be an asset for the Eagles this year. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. Kevin Petula was an in-house candidate, and we saw how that turned out. Now you're bringing in a guy, and you're bringing in 2 guys who've got a lot of experience with a lot of some of the more innovative, creative, successful offensive coaches out there. And the Eagles are just, I think they're doing the right thing, and they're setting themselves up to have some success. Now, Shanahan and McVay didn't win the Super Bowl, and they didn't get to the Super Bowl. So for as great as they are of offensive minds, Kyle never won one, and McVay's only won one, as many as Nick Sirianni. So you can develop QBs, and you can get them to a certain – and there were times this year where McVay was, in the playoffs, critical of his own play calling, critical of the way he ran the game. So you got to get – it's hard. You get to a certain point, and you have success, and then it takes those breaks in the NFC Championship game. It takes a lucky bounce to go your way, a call to go your way. And sometimes that doesn't happen.
By the way, Rob, you should know, because you are based in Tampa, Rob Maaddi from the AP Senior NFL Insider, joining us on 97.3 ESPN. WWE just announced that WWE Backlash is going to be in Tampa May 9th. So I thought I should let you know.
Oh, okay, May 9th. So last June, I believe it was, they had a show in Tampa, and somebody reached out to me, gave me some tickets. I went down, and it was Monday night. It was Monday Night Raw. I had 2 tickets, so I couldn't bring the girls. It was an actual date night with Remy, who, as I told you earlier, told me to stop watching wrestling. She's like, all right, let's go. We lasted about 30 minutes, and she's like, I've seen enough. We can get out of here. Maybe I'll go to this one myself. Maybe I can get a credential and like cover WWE. You know, for all of the people I've ever interviewed in my life, and it's been everybody. I've been there with Jordan and LeBron and Brady, of course, and Montana many times, and all of these guys in any sport. The one guy I've never interviewed that I want is Ric Flair, and he's here in Tampa. So I got to make that happen.
Oh, I mean, come on, Ric Flair. I mean, that's good. That's got to be the biggest bucket list left, right?
It's got. I mean, I even interviewed the Hulkster. I asked Hogan. He came to a Phillies game. I was like, let's arm wrestle. And he's like, I got nothing to gain. I'm supposed to beat you, and if you beat me, like I got everything to lose. So he wouldn't arm wrestle me, but we acted like we shook hands, like it took a nice picture. So
that's funny. Rob, couple of quick hits before we let you go. I want to get your thoughts on some of these other coaching moves. Are we buying into the Todd Monken loving up on Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland, or do you think that was just for TV cameras?
I can't wait to go see Shedeur at the Pro Bowl games on Tuesday night. and Joe Flacco, I can't believe Joe finally made one. I would have thought at some point in his 17, 18 years in the NFL, Joe Flacco would have made a Pro Bowl or been like the 19th alternate, because that's what it ends up coming down to. Tyler Snoop Huntley made one before Joe Flacco. Blows my mind. I don't make too much out of Todd Monken and Shedeur right now, or anything that's happening. You've got to play that situation as Todd Monken, as a guy who is open to competition, who wants to help develop his young quarterbacks, and they're certainly going to be. And I don't know. I think Shedeur has shown enough to warrant a look, and so has Dylan Gabriel, but I wouldn't give either one of them the starting job, and I think they got to compete for it. And if they want to bring in a veteran, or if they draft somebody, which is a very likely possibility, they should all compete for the starting job. I'm very interested in seeing what happens with the drama there in Cleveland. Not only that, but with Jim Schwartz. I didn't check in on the past 2 days, but on Schwartz and the Browns. But they've got a lot going on. The Browns are always the Browns.
That is true. Which OC hire are you most intrigued by going the next season? Is it Mike McDaniel going to the Chargers, or is it young Declan Doyle, now the OC for the Ravens?
You didn't put Dable in that equation. I would love to see what he can do with Cam Ward, because I know he loves him. But if you say interested or intrigued, it's always Mike McDaniel, because he's the relationship between Mike McDaniel and Jim Harbaugh is going to be hysterical. I thought McDaniel and Philly would have been must-watch news conferences. I would love to be in a room and hear McDaniel speak to Jim Harbaugh. I just want to hear that conversation. You can't have two more opposite dudes, and one's the head coach and one's the offensive coordinator, and how is that going to play out? And he's got a ton of talent with Justin Herbert. They've got to work on that run game, and he's a great run game coordinator. They've got to get Justin Herbert some protection up front. They've got 2 tackles in Alton Slater who were injured, and that was a big part of the reason why they could only get so far. And they've got to get him some. Keenan Allen came back and is 100 years old, and they've got to get a little bit more talent too at the wide receiver position. But I'm really intrigued to see how that plays out. And Declan Doyle in Chicago, certainly you got a young guy who the Eagles, right, we're interested in too as well, and he's got talent there. But that's Ben Johnson's offense, and that's always going to be. I feel like he's going to be in a position where it's like being the Chiefs offensive coordinator, and Andy Reid's always going to be thought of as the guy running that offense. Same as if you're in L.A. and it's Sean McVay, and same as in San Fran, it's Kyle Shanahan.
I will say really quick before I get the last thought and question for you, I was dying laughing when they tried to ask McDaniel like a head coaching type question, and he snapped back. He goes, "Well, that's a head coach question." And then he sees Jim Harbaugh, on the side of the room. He goes, "Oh, the head coach right there. Why don't you ask him that question?" So, like, he at least is already kind of doing the whole, like, "Hey, I'm not going to walk into that territory. Ask the head coach that question, not me." So I do respect him, but the way he did it was absolutely hilarious. Before I let you go, Rob, I did want to ask, because Buffalo, I think, is very interesting, because it kind of feels like the head coach, Joe Brady, he got the job because of Josh Allen. Are we concerned at all that making Sean McDermott the scapegoat is not going to actually fix any of Buffalo's problems?
Buffalo's problems certainly extended for me beyond Sean McDermott, and I think they should be pointed at the guy who is assembling the roster. I just didn't. I think Sean McDermott took the fall for a flawed roster, and he reports made it known in the season that he just didn't have the playmakers and the pieces. They just haven't been able to surround Josh Allen with that talent at the receiver spot. And I know they had Stephon Diggs at one point, and he kind of wore out his welcome, and they took some swings at some young guys. And how can Keon Coleman come back after the way the owner, Terry Pegula, spoke about that draft process there? So Joe Brady's going to work well with Josh Allen. Obviously, familiarity, that's his guy, and that's going to be great. But they need more talent to get to the next level, and that's been what they've lacked. I know they've got the rushing champion in James Cook, and that certainly helps Josh Allen, and that helps any offense to have a guy who can run the ball that effectively. But the name of the game in the NFL is scoring more points and moving the ball downfield, and Josh Allen can't throw the ball and catch it himself, as the famous ex-wife of Tom Brady once said.
I was going to say also Donovan McNabb knows something about that from his years with his mediocre receivers, but that's a different conversation another day. He's Rob Maaddi. Of course, he has covered it all, now working for the AP as the senior NFL insider, on his way to Super Bowl 60 out there in the San Francisco, Santa Clara area. Checking out all of his coverage at Rob Maaddi on X, Real Rob Maaddi on Instagram. And don't forget, Faith on the Field, heard Saturday and Sunday mornings each weekend right here on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, always appreciate the time, my friend.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate you guys. Keep up the great work.